Today, from near and far, we're gathered here in this cathedral church to do two things: to celebrate the life of former Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, Patrick Augustus Mervyn Manning, and also to offer our deepest condolences and prayerful support to Mrs. Hazel Manning, a tower of strength. Her two sons, her relatives, and members of the People's National Movement family, on the death of one so greatly beloved. At a time like this, it is only too natural to do the human thing and feel a sense of loss when death claims one who meant so much to so many. But the sting of death will be lessened by the fact that he will be immortalized in the hearts and minds of the people of this land for his contribution to national development in its widest possible meaning, and for all that he was. In celebrating the life of the late Patrick Manning, it is not my intention to do an appraisal of his plans, programs, and policies for two reasons. First, this is not the time and place for such an undertaking. And secondly, I do not possess the competence to do such. I shall leave that to the political analysts and historians of the future. For me, this is a time to reflect on the man who lived within the politician. Patrick Manning, as Prime Minister, attended worship here in this cathedral church on Fridays at noon. I think he would have just been leaving. And when he did not attend here, he did so at the chapel at Hayes Court, the official residence of the Bishop of Trinidad and Tobago. But there were other times when he came to Hayes Court to speak with me on matters of faith and life. And when he didn't come to Hayes Court, he invited me to his office. Some of these conversations either preceded or followed major events. Two conversations etched in my memory were those prior to and following the momentous general election of 2010. In victory or in defeat, Patrick Manning was great-hearted. In these conversations recently mentioned, and those of which I have spoken previously, I saw the depth of Mr. Manning's faith and his tremendous love of God. In short, I saw the nature of the relationship he had with God and the way it shaped his life. The God whom he knew and served was not a policeman waiting to apprehend and punish the wrongdoer. No, the God whom he served was the potter, working with the clay of our lives, molding and remolding us into vessels fit for his purpose in time and in eternity. Patrick Manning understood that every relationship that excludes God becomes oppressive, and so negatively impacting the quality of one's service. He understood that service begins with a consciousness of the primacy of God in our lives. A God to whom he looked constantly. And being a servant of God informed his life of selfless service to all. Service for him was a way of life. That is why he served with distinction. Another window into the soul of Patrick Manning, which was opened during those conversations, was his fortitude. And by that I mean his inner strength and spiritual courage. Inner strength and spiritual courage. The scriptures, which Mr. Manning loved and read, carry an important message to all whom God calls into his service. That message is, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. That message was spoken to men of valor, even after they had accomplished great feats. Men like Moses and Joshua. It was also spoken to women of gentle hearts, like Mary, the mother of Jesus. Why? Why this message, do not be afraid? Because cowardice and fear rob life of its vitality, which so often is the cause of the loss of golden opportunities. Fear creates immovable obstacles. It was William Shakespeare who wrote, "Cowards die many times before their deaths. The valiant never taste of death but once." Cowardice and fear cause us to lose the vision of God as our soul's strength. Fear of loss, despair, and opposition with a small o. These are the pillars upon which cowardice stands. Spiritual cowardice works its way into the very soul when the circumstances of life get the better of us. Our circumstances so easily blind us to the presence of God. We overcome or prevent the damage done by cowardice and fear when we meditate on the greatness of God. And that often was the subject of our brother Patrick's meditation, the greatness of God. It was because our brother Patrick understood that sometimes in the providence of God, His will may be your victory or your defeat, that he took the misunderstood position, we will win alone or we will lose alone. It was not arrogance, it was not pride, it was his confidence in divine providence. I feel I stand on safe ground when I say some people would have found Mr. Manning a little more acceptable if his relationship with God was not so dominant. If only he would tone it down at times. But that grows from a misunderstanding of what his faith meant to him. His faith was like the underlying theme of a symphony with sub-themes and variations built upon it. Take away the underlying theme and the composition falls apart. Or to use another analogy, his faith was his life support. Take that faith away, and the person you would have before you was someone other than Patrick Manning. I had the great privilege visiting him at hospital on Thursday, 30th of June, when I went to pray with him. After greeting me, he held my hand for the better part of the hour I spent with him in the presence of Mrs. Manning. We spoke. His faith remained unshaken, and his very words testified to his readiness for his departure. And just as he had never walked alone in life, he knew he would not walk alone in death. It was that knowledge which caused him to choose as one of his favorite Bible texts, verse 4 of Psalm 23. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. For thou art with me. And he was conscious of the presence of God with him in that hospital ward. When you understand Patrick Manning's faith, you will understand his life, his passion, often mistaken for arrogance, and his commitment to selfless service. When you understand his fortitude, you will understand his statement about winning alone and losing alone. When you understand his relationship with God, you will understand the joy of his living and his readiness for dying. As you enter the realm of eternity, my dear brother Patrick, may the holy angels greet you, and may you share in the eternal fellowship of him who died for you and rose for you, so that you might reign with him in glory. May he rest in peace, and may he rise in glory. Amen.
The Right Reverend Calvin Bess, retired diocesan bishop, delivering the sermon at the state